family, as a PK, we moved from Chicago to Atlanta. Now, in today's terms, that might sound like a neutral transition, but in 1985, probably when many of you were born, Atlanta was a pretty big southern town. It wasn't what it is today. In fact, this was my welcome to Atlanta. I got out of the moving van, went into my father's house, my uncle's house, opened his refrigerator, and there was a possum staring right at me that apparently was for dinner that evening. Coming from Chicago, that wasn't a possum, that was a rat. My father's family is from Chicago. My mother's people are pig farmers of North Georgia. And so moving to Atlanta, part of our southern tradition, I think Linda would attest to this, is every weekend, every Saturday, we would drive to the country to visit my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and cousins. Every Saturday, Atlanta to Gainesville, Georgia, which is where my mother's side of the family is from. One time, however, we were traveling. My brother is a lot like Will, and he noticed on the map, not Google Maps, but an actual map, that we were not taking the most direct route between Atlanta and Gainesville, Georgia. So he asked my mother why this was. She very calmly got in one of those weird demeanors and said to us, it's important that you all understand this now that we live in Georgia. Black people don't travel through Forsyth County, Georgia. Well, some of you all might remember, it was a little over a year after that conversation when Hosea Williams, Reverend Hosea Williams, you might remember that name, he was played by Wendell Pierce in the movie Selma, gathered the Atlanta community together, and after hearing what my mother said, he said these words, "We need to travel through Forsyth County." Imagine Jesus around the same age, his parents taking the trip that is chronicled from Nazareth to Jerusalem, and him, like my brother, asking, why are we not taking the most direct route?
Yeah.
Why is it that we don't travel directly? Can you hear Mary saying to Jesus, listen, Jews don't travel through Samaria. You're old enough to understand this now, son. They don't like us and we don't like them. There's a long, convoluted history involved in all of this. You don't need to know all of that. Just understand. We don't travel through Samaria. That gives some foundation. The first part of this text that says he needed to go through Samaria. We live in an interesting time. In fact, those are finite words. And those are infinite words in a finite time. Purposeful and intentional. As Jesus raises to us an idea, every now and then it might be necessary. In fact, we might need to go to some places that make us uncomfortable.
Yes.
There might be some times when we arrive at a point in our life, in our spiritual life, where we stop and say to ourselves, I have gathered around myself a community in which I am very comfortable. Community that believes what I believe, sees the world the way that I see the world. And I can keep doing this for the rest of my life and be absolutely comfortable. You can do that. And you will stay exactly where you are. But every now and then, we need to travel through Samaria. That conversation between Jesus and his mother literally could have happened at the fork in the road. They're right there having a decision to make. Do we go around as we've done, as our people have been taught to do, as we have been instructed to do, what we know is most safe and most comfortable for us? Or do we press forward and make our way through? Jesus may have had this discussion with his disciples at the same point. And can you not see all of them saying, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't go through Samaria. We need to go through Samaria. My heart aches for the church today, but perhaps not for the reason that you are thinking. I am not one of those that prescribes to the idea that the church has seen its greater days. I am not calling the undertaker to come and bury the church. I remember the words that God gave to a prophet who had that same thought. as he sat under a juniper tree and turned his eyes towards God and said, I'm the only one left. God looked down on me and said, you must be crazy. Do you really believe that I would allow my church to get to the point where it's all in your hands? There are thousands who have not bowed the knee to Baal.
Preach.
I believe that our church is going to be okay. What worries me, however, is that we have come very purposeful in dividing ourselves and making sure that we only have to exist in communities that will make us comfortable. We don't want to go through Samaria.
Yeah.
When we meet a Christian these days, let's be honest. When you meet someone and you discover for the first time that they're a Christian, the very next thing we do is we try to find out what kind of. So we ask the right words, we ask the right questions, we try to go to the point, what seminary did you go to, what denomination are you a part of, so that we can determine, are you my kind of Christian? In fact, there are some Christians that I would suggest to you are more open to the thoughts of people of other faiths than they are to those who likewise believe in the blood of Jesus Christ. What type of Christian are you? Are you progressive? Are you conservative? Are you liberal? Are you fundamentalist? Are you charismatic? Are you liturgical? And don't get me started on denominations. We meet here all night. Our denominations have denominations now. It says he needed to go through Samaria. I'm convinced today that we need to go through Samaria. That we need to take a moment and get out of our very comfortable homostatic environments where we are never challenged, never offended, never tested, never confronted, and find our way ourselves to places that cause us to grow. This happened to me this summer when Pope Francis announced that he needed to go through Philadelphia. And I joined my voice to the chorus of Protestant pastors in Philadelphia who were quite upset that our normal routine was going to be confronted, that our normal routine was going to be disrupted. Our church services would be, and so many of my friends were in what was called the box in Philadelphia where traffic would be shut. Oh, we were mad. We got on Facebook and said all kinds of nasty things. But it was also on Facebook that I found the writings of a friend of mine that she shares with me our work in our Pico network in Philadelphia, Father Christopher Walsh. I saw his joy, how excited he was, how his energy and life in ministry was growing back. I saw the pilgrims from all over the country that were sleeping on the pews of his church, in his gymnasium, and without even a conversation, just observing him on Facebook. I said, you know what? I need to go through Samaria. I didn't even want to look into Samaria. But what I discovered is that in Samaria, that there's no one who is as anti-hierarchical when it comes to the church as I am. I could never have a pope, but he does. And the pope gives him meaning and gives his faith life. And I don't have to agree with that in order to appreciate that and honor that. But then let's go just a little deeper. For even when we as Christian churches do gather, sometimes the question that she asked Jesus is the one that is the big elephant in the room. Who is right? You Jews say we ought to worship this way, and we Samaritans believe we ought to worship this way. Every Christian group believes Jesus is on their side. That might be the one thing we have in common. We are confident. That if Jesus came right now, he would join our church, he would be a member of our denomination, he would believe exactly what we believe. And what's interesting is that we're all right. We're absolutely all right because we're all wrong. Because we all have stuff that we do that is not correct. We all try to take Jesus and shape him in our image instead of allowing him to shape the image that we have. Who's right? Notice Jesus didn't even answer the question. But maybe we need to show the world a more excellent way. Maybe every now and then we have to get outside of our community and take a trip to Samaria. There's an old country expression that says, even a broke clock is right twice a day. I would suggest to you, we can all learn something from somebody. No matter how different we might feel, no matter how how challenged we might be. We might even get offended a couple of times.
That's it right there.
But if we can get past our offense, there is growth that comes in those situations.
Wow.
Finally, let me go just a little deeper. For years, the black church has been traveling through Samaria. We have been told in order to properly do the work of the church that we must attend European seminaries, where we'll learn church history, which really is European church history.
Wow.
Where we will learn theology, which really is Eurocentric theologies. We will learn to worship, as if we do not already know these things.
Come on, preacher.
And honestly, we have been better because of our trips to Samaria. But then when we suggest that maybe some people ought to travel to our Samaria, we're told, well, hold on, your theology is relegated to a small elective black liberation theology. Your form of worship, that type of emotionalism, it's not anything that interests us. We've been discussing this week in our class that one of the leading edges of the United Church of Christ is passionate spirituality. I could solve that tomorrow. Take a trip to Samaria. When you get home, consider traveling, taking a trip to an African American or Hispanic congregation. They probably worship a little longer than you would like to. But if you go with the mindset that they have something to offer you, not as a tourist, not as someone to look and to be a voyeur, but to really say, what is it that I can learn from this trip?
Preach.
Ask them, what does the prayer brand do when they get here at 5 o'clock in the morning and tarry before the Lord praying? What's really happening when women stand up and are overcome with the power of the Spirit to the point that they'll dance out of their shoes and their wig? What's really happening when you preachers are hollering and shouting and got sweat dripping all off of you? What we might discover is, believe it or not, there are some things that have happened in black churches. We've been doing this thing for a while. This has been the vehicle that has brought us through many dangers, toils, and snares. And we have just as much of a contribution to make to Christianity as the most vaunted and elevated European theologian. Coming to this gathering, for me, has been going through Samaria. 8 years ago, when Dr. Geneva Butts and Dr. Stephen Ray suggested that my extremely charismatic, non-denominational church has a place in the United Church of Christ, I knew this would be traveling through Samaria. But thanks be to God, they were much wiser than I was. And they said, Sean, there's a place for you here. Notice what happens when you go through Samaria. The story ends by this one woman, after one conversation, going back to town. 12 disciples went to town, and they came back with sandwiches. One woman went to town, and she came back with the whole town. God bless you.